I will talk today about the cold Nordics and the hot stocks. And it's of course true that the Nordics are cold, and I live in Helsinki, where the annual temperature is around 6 degrees Celsius. So it's quite cold. But on the other hand, there's a lot of things that makes the Nordics warm or even hot. So I want to talk about the Nordic societies, the Nordic model, and what makes societies quite unique in the world. I'm bunching here all the Nordic countries together because they're quite similar, have similar demographics and systems of government, and the societies are similar in many ways. So when I talk about the Nordics, I mean Finland, Sweden, Denmark, and Norway. Iceland, of course, is a part of the Nordics, but it's in this presentation I'm focusing only on the bigger four. I will talk about the Nordic economies and the equity markets, the Nordic point of view, and of course a lot about sustainability, which is in very many ways part of our DNA. And then finally I will say a few words about Fondita, which is the company that I represent. So moving on to the Nordic model. So when talking about Nordic society, I think it's good to start with the Nordic model. The countries in the Nordics have a strong tradition of collaboration and shared features of policy and welfare systems, and we refer to this as the Nordic model. So the Nordic model is defined as a combination of free market capitalism and a comprehensive welfare state. But what does this mean for society then? So the Nordic model has been really successful in laying the groundwork for societies that work very well and create a good platform for high levels of entrepreneurship and innovation. There's a very highly educated society and a comprehensive healthcare system paving the way for a stable and good society. So all 4 Nordic countries are actually ranked in the top 8 of healthcare systems worldwide, according to a recent US study. There's a strong sense of equality. The taxes, high taxes, of course, play a big part in this. But also the equality stabilizes societies and gives a strong sense of community. And also it's contributed to the Nordics having the lowest rate of corruption in the world. According to the OECD, the Nordics are ranked among the countries with the lowest economic disparities in the world, and also at the top of the lowest corruption. Finland is actually the least corrupt country in the world. I added here a picture of our president. You can see him here. That's Sauli Niinistö. That's the morning after he got elected for the first term in 2012. And the reason I added this, because it's a nice picture that shows a lot about the Nordic society. He's a normal guy who just became president, and he's out shoveling snow, just like anybody else. There has been in the Nordics a very high level of investment in free education. There's basically free education from start to finish. And this has given a very highly educated workforce. And when it comes to education, the Nordics are ranked very high in the top 10. Finland is number 1, Denmark is number 4, and Sweden is number 6 in the Universitas 21 education ranking. So in many ways, the Nordics find themselves ranking at the very top in many different rankings. For example, the Global Competitive Index ranks the Nordics in the top 20. The Good Country Index, which measures what each country on earth contributes to the common good of humanity and what it takes away relative to its size, ranks the Nordics also in the top 10, with Finland number 1, Sweden and Denmark also in the top 5 in this ranking. And then another more lighthearted ranking that you might have read about, it's the World Happiness Index or Happiness Report. And once again, it has placed Finland as the happiest country in the world for the 6th year in a row. And I don't know if you ever met a Nordic person, especially a Finnish person, but they don't smile very often. And that's the reason I put this picture of Kimi Räikkönen, which you might know. He was a Formula 1 driver. And I don't think he ever smiled in his whole life. They called him the Iceman. But all in all, I think this happiness is not measuring how much you smile, but it's measuring how people are content with their societies and the opportunities that it offers. So moving on to the Nordic point of view. So when I talk about the Nordic point of view, it's very much how we view the world in the Nordics and how we view economies and businesses. And I'd like to just bring out a few points that really help to describe this Nordic point of view. So what I mean by this, I think a big part of it is sustainability. It's really built into our DNA in the Nordics. The Nordics are in many ways forerunners in sustainable investing, sustainability, environmental protection. Clean nature is very important to us. It's a big part of the Nordic lifestyle to be close to nature. We have a really harsh climate, Kühler, Norden, so it's really trained us not to be wasteful. I mean, you mind what you have. There's a huge respect for the environment, which also creates a need for companies to find innovations or business models that are sustainable and resource efficient and have low CO2 emissions. For example, in the 2021 Global Risk Profile Index, it's an index that measures environment, human rights, and health and safety. The Nordics all scored in the top, with Finland number 1, Sweden number 2, Iceland number 3, and Norway number 4. And this is really what sets the Nordic countries apart from the rest of Europe, is this environmental protection. There's a strong focus on going international. The Nordics are very small and dependent on foreign trade, so the small market has really forced the countries to look internationally when they go out and make business in the world. I'll come back to this international part on my next slide. Then talking about strong focus on quality and innovation and being network ready. For example, the European Commission's Innovation Scoreboard ranks Sweden, Finland, and Denmark as the most innovative countries in the EU. Their performance is 125% above EU average. When it comes to network readiness, there is a huge readiness in the digital infrastructure. For example, since 2010, Finland is the only country in the world that has made internet a human right and a legal right, not just a privilege. So the reasoning is that the internet has become an essential part of modern society. Then coming to transparency and business ethics, the governance in the Nordics is high. As I mentioned before, it has the lowest corruption in the world, a genuine focus on ESG. And all 4 Nordic countries are in the top 5 of the ESG score of the World Economics Forum. So then moving on to the Nordic economies. I made this big slide with a lot of information on it, but the takeaways here is that when you combine the Nordic countries, Sweden, Norway, and Denmark, you get a population of around 27 million people and a GDP of 1.8 trillion euros, which makes it an economic region that is slightly smaller than Italy, but slightly larger than Russia. Actually, it makes it the 5th largest economy in Europe. And if we look at these economies, they're quite different also. We have, for example, Norway, which has a lot of oil and gas, a lot of natural resource use. And the largest companies in the Norwegian stock market are basically featured around oil. In Denmark, for example, you have the largest companies are in the pharmaceutical business. Over 50% of the market in Denmark is pharmaceuticals. You might know some of these companies like Novo Nordisk. In Sweden, you have industrials, healthcare, and financials. It's by far the biggest market in the Nordics, with many very big international companies. And in Finland, you also have industrials, materials, and financial sectors that dominate. But all these economies together are among the richest in the world if you measure by GDP per capita. So the Nordic stock markets, I mentioned before, these small and open economies, they go international at a very early stage. And in order to be able to go international, they have to really create a world-class product, a product or a service that is best in class. When you stay on your home market, you might get away with lesser products or services, but when you go global from the first stage, you have to really do it well. So when it comes to entrepreneurship, the Nordic countries rank the highest in the Global Entrepreneurship Index, where Denmark is actually ranked number 6 in the whole world as the most entrepreneurial country. There's been a historic need, of course, to capitalize these export companies, and there's been a big historic desire to invest in stocks. And a lot of these stocks are called people shares. It's when people invest their excess liquidity into shares. So the appetite for equities in the Nordics is very high. We have around 2,000 listed stocks in the Nordic market, which is a very big number if you compare it to other European markets. And if you look at the index, for example, if you look at small caps, we have around 1,000 small cap companies in the Nordics. If you compare it to the MSCI Europe Small Cap Index, the Nordics actually make up 22% of the index weight of this index, which is larger than the DACH region combined, and actually only second to the UK, even though this region has 27 million people compared to the 100 million in DACH. So there really is a big number of Nordic small cap companies on the market. Actually, in 2020, 50% of all the listings on the European market were made in the Nordics, and Sweden was the busiest market in 2021 with listings worth 14 billion euros. And the Nordics had about 40% in 21 of the European transactions. And actually, over the last 10 years, of all the IPOs taking place in Europe, 20 to 50% have been taking place in the Nordic countries. And many of these Nordic IPOs have been in the health technology and health services sector and the tech sector, which are sectors that we at Fondita actually look very much at. So we find numerous of these small companies on the Nordic market that we really much like to invest in. And all of these factors actually create what we call the Nordic Alpha. And the Nordic Alpha is the fact that Nordic stocks have outperformed global, US, and European stocks over the last 100 years. So there really is a really strong business case when it comes to investing in the Nordics. I put here some companies that you might know from the Nordics, examples of these big international companies. These are, of course, just a few. You might know some more. IKEA, H&M, Lego. So again, underlining the point that the Nordic companies go global at a very early stage. And to prove this to you, of course, I will show a graph. This is Nordic markets versus other markets in the world. So we have a couple of indices here that are representing different markets. The blue line is the S&P 500. The green line is the MSCI World. Stocks Europe is this orange one, and then you have this goldish MSCI Nordic countries, and then on the top you have the Nordic small cap indices. So as you can see, for 25 years, the Nordics have clearly outperformed all of these markets together. So then a few words about Fondita, which is the companies that I represent. I talked a lot about the Nordics, so I will say a few words about my company. So we are a Nordic manager based in Helsinki. We turned 25 last year, so we have some experience in this market. We're a boutique fund manager, and for us this stands for independence and being, a group of entrepreneurs who are really in it for the long term, skin in the game, as we say. We manage around 650 million euros at the time in 8 equity funds. We have Nordic funds, European funds, and thematic funds, but all of these funds together have quite a Nordic tilt to them. We have been investing with the same philosophy since 1997, which is a stock picking philosophy, which is very long term, and we have been doing it with a sustainability approach for many, many years. Our approach is to be truly active, and we show this through focus. We have focused funds with a geographical and thematical focus, and we have clear ideas that we really believe in. And we also focus a lot on sustainability. Sustainability is really built into our DNA in many ways. The Nordics and at Fondita, we've been working with this for over 10 years. We have funds that are both labeled with different eco-labels, such as the Austrian Umweltzeichen, and working really with our own approach to sustainability, looking beyond sustainability scores and looking more at the business model of the companies. Are they really sustainable, and do they have a sustainable business model over the long term? So where are we looking for excess returns then? So we want to find companies that are driven by some kind of megatrend. And the megatrends that we're looking for since 25 years already is demographics. We're seeing an aging population, so we like to find companies that are getting a benefit from this, digitalization, companies that are driving the digitalization in the world, and the environment, of course. And we see that these trends, when we started 25 years ago to look at these, they were current, but they're even more current now. We like companies that are entrepreneurial. We find a lot of these countries in the Nordics where there's an active owner who has skin in the game. We think these companies give a better return over time. We like the smaller companies because that's where you actually find the real entrepreneurial ones. We like to be part of the growth story from when the company is small and when it goes out and grows in the world. And although we do have a strong focus in the Nordics, we apply our Nordic point of view to all our funds, the global funds and the European funds. But all of these funds also have quite a large Nordic exposure. And as I mentioned, with sustainability, it's not only about ESG scores. I don't think you can create alpha by investing in companies with a AAA ESG score. The way to make alpha is to invest in companies that have sustainability built into their DNA, have a business model which is sustainable, have some kind of product or service that is driving change. That's where we look for alpha, and that's a big cornerstone of how we approach sustainability.